Welcome to the first class on the structure and details of the second Beis Hamikdash. And before we begin, I just want to point out that most of what we're going to be learning is from the Rambam in Hilchos Beis Abchira and from Mishnayos Maseches Midas. So let's begin right away with 2 points before we actually start talking about the Harabayas. The first one is regarding the measurements. So the measurements were in Tfachim and Amos. And over here we're following the opinion of Reb Chaim Noah that an amma is almost 19 inches, so it's a little more than 1.5 feet. And the second point is regarding the size of things. And this is in order to have context and appreciation for how large everything was. So all the doorways in the Beis Hamikdash, except for the one to the Ulam, which was twice the size of all the other doorways, so all the doorways were 20 amas high and 10 amas wide. And this is about 31.5 feet high and 15.5 feet wide, which is about 5.5 times the height of a person that's 5 feet 10 inches tall and about as wide as 9 people. Or you could view it about as high as a 3-story house. So that's the size of the doorways, and it gives you a certain sense and appreciation of how large everything was. So let's begin by going straight to the Harabayas. Now, very important here to point out is that everything is proportional. So the Harabayas was a perfect square. It was 500 amas by 500 amas. And at the end, we'll give a certain visual of what that looks like. And in the Harabayas, this is the location of the Azara. And as you can see, we're only talking about the Azara right now, not the Ezras Nashim, which was to the east of the Azara, because the Azara is the structure that corresponds to and is parallel to the Mishkan. That's the main structure. And everything in terms of the discussion is going to revolve mostly around the Azara. So for instance, when we talk about the spaces around the Azara, we don't include the Ezras Nashim. So as we can see over here, the largest space was in the south, then the east, then the north, and the smallest was to the west. However, when we add the Ezras Nashim, we'll see that actually the smallest is to the east, but nevertheless what's written in the Mishnayos is that the largest is to the south, then the east, then the north, and the smallest is to the west, because the Ezras Nashim is considered an added structure to the Azara. Now, in addition, over here we have entrances to the Harabayas. So there are 2 entrances to the south. They're called Sharei Chuda. They were used for going in and going out. To the west we have 1 Shar, which is called Shar Kippainis. It was also used for going in and going out. Up north, we have 1 Shar, which is called Shar Tadi, and it was not used for going in and going out, except for, as we may discuss later, a Kayan who was a Baal Keri. Also, what was unique about that Shar is that the top of it wasn't straight, but rather it was like an upside-down V, like a tent. 2 rocks or boulders that were in the shape of an upside-down V. And finally, to the east, we have Shar Shushan, which had the image of Shushan engraved in it. Now, just to mention a little bit about the gates, because the south side of the Harabayas had the largest open space, and that's where the Yidden would congregate, so therefore there were 2 entrances on that side. Also, it's mentioned that that's where Yerushalayim was in terms of where people lived. So that's where they would enter from primarily, which is from down south. Another thing to point out over here is regarding Shar Shushan, the wall on top of the Shushan gate, so they had the stone wall, was low, so that the Kayan standing on the Har Mishcha for the Paraduma could see into the Heichel, because as we'll see later on, the ground was elevated as you go into the Ezras Nashim, then even higher up into the Azara, even higher up into the Heichel, so you could not see through the opening, which is 20 amas high. You had to see from above the door, the gate of Shar Shushan, so it couldn't be very high up because then it would block the vision. Another couple of things to mention here are, number 1, that the Rambam, actually we just learned this recently, says that there was a Bezdin of 23 judges at the entrance of the Harabayas. Doesn't mention which entrance, but it was at the entrance of the Harabayas. And finally, for a context of the size, you can see over here, for those that are familiar with Crown Heights, so you can see over here, this is about the size of the Harabayas. It's from Eastern Parkway. It goes all the way down Kingston. We're almost to Carroll Street. And then we go to Brooklyn, all the way back up to Eastern Parkway. And another view of that, a little bit of a 3D view. You could see it over here. Almost to Carroll, up Brooklyn, and down to Eastern Parkway. And with that, we'll conclude the first class.